My wife has spent $100,000 plus and dedicated the last 5 years of her life to becoming a doctor. Today she said she changed her mind and wants to be a housewife instead. Hello, I, 32F, have been with my wife, 31F, since our second year of high school. From what I remember, she has always wanted to become a doctor. A pediatric doctor to be exact. While I kept changing my mind and was continuously unsure about what I wanted, my wife was extremely dedicated on wanting to be a pediatric doctor. I've seen her study her butt off in college and cry from frustration as she studied. Seeing her work so hard gave me the motivation to finish school and become a lawyer. We've been each other's biggest supporters throughout this journey. From working odd jobs to support ourselves, having cheap dates at the park and crying from stress and frustration, it was like finally seeing the end of the tunnel with my partner next to me the entire time. We got married right after I graduated from law school and started living in a bigger place with the money we had saved together. She finished her internship this year and is about to legally become a licensed doctor. However, her happy tune about becoming a doctor suddenly changed. I'm not really sure when her obsession with becoming a housewife started, but seeing her go from being a career-oriented woman with hopes and dreams to wanting to become a housewife gave me severe whiplash. I just couldn't understand what could make her change her mind so suddenly. I tried asking about it, and she said something along the lines of, "I just want to cook and clean for you. Live a simple life." I assumed that maybe she was feeling lonely since I've been working a lot, so I told her that we'd go on more dates and spend more time together, but again she insisted that she wanted to be a housewife. Don't get me wrong, I don't think there's anything wrong with being a housewife, but to give up your long years of studying and hard work to stay home and cook is absurd. We're already splitting the chores at home, and we've just been on very equal footing since forever. I just can't seem to read her. Maybe being a doctor just isn't for her, or perhaps she got bored. I just don't get it. I want her to do what makes her happy because I truly love her and she's my entire world, but is stopping everything and throwing away the chance of having one of the most respectable jobs on earth just to stay home and do chores really worth it? Maybe I'm asking the wrong questions. Maybe she's trying to tell me something and I'm being dense. I wish I could read her mind. I just don't get it. At the end of the day, I just want to know why and maybe convince her otherwise. As much as I think it's a bad idea, it's still her life. But I don't think I'll ever be able to forgive myself if I let her throw her career away. Relevant comments. Commenter. I worry about the lack of communication between you two. She's expressing a desire, but not saying why. You want to guess the reason, but don't want to ask her for some reason? You also want to talk her out of it without even knowing her reasoning. Are you totally against it no matter what, or just totally against it because you are making huge assumptions about why? Opie. Hello. I must admit that my initial reaction wasn't great. I had given her all the reasons as to why it's not a good idea to throw her hard work all away and assumed the possible reasonings all on my own. Thank you for pointing that out to me, as I haven't even noticed this myself. In the moment, I only thought about what I personally thought would be good for my wife, rather than what she thinks is good for her. Again, I thank you for your honesty. Update 1. Hello everyone. I realize that it's been quite some time since I've made this post, and I apologize for updating you all so late. If I'm being honest, this post slipped my mind completely. My wife and I were going through our own healing journey, and I simply wanted to focus on her. However, things are much better now, and both my wife and I are content with our lives. Here's a proper and pretty lengthy update for the ones who were curious about how my wife and I were holding up now. For one, she's working to finish her residency. I'm so incredibly proud of her for pushing through, even with all the odds against her. She's incredibly hardworking, and I'll always be there for her. Through the past few months, I had to revisit a lot of areas within our relationship. For one, the status of our relationship was worse than I imagined. There were major life events in her life that I would have never known about if I hadn't broken the growing wall between us. My wife has always been a hard worker, and because simple encouragement always seemed to be enough to boost her morale, I assumed that this was still the case. I was terribly wrong. My wife needed a friend, a shoulder to lean on, a confidant, and a lover. But during her very difficult year, I was none of those things. As her wife, I failed to give her the proper love and support she desperately needed and deserved. Not only was she burnt out, but because I unintentionally put work before her, I wounded her deeply. Our intimacy was practically non-existent. Our conversations never went beyond surface-level subjects, and sometimes, the only time we'd see one another was when one of us was already long asleep. Whenever I would ask her if she was okay, she always told me she was fine, which I doubted. But since I didn't want to push her, I stopped asking. That's where I made my mistake. Asking wasn't enough. I was foolish. We barely saw each other, did anything together, shared words of endearment, or basked in each other's presence. Intimacy just seemed so foreign between us. Like a fool, I thought, hey, I asked if she was okay and she said she was fine. My job here is done. I never once tried to give her the reassurance that I was someone she could depend on, that I was ready to sit and listen, that she could complain to me about the same thing over and over again, and that I'd still listen with just as much attention. During a time of great stress, I was everything but helpful. The distance between us was growing pretty rapidly, and it's only after her insistence on becoming a housewife that this veil was lifted. Thanks to my initial post, I received a lot of helpful criticism both online and in real life. It took a lot of personal reflection. Initially, I thought applying what I was told would be a piece of cake, but seeing myself struggle to approach her made me realize how much we had truly grown apart. Little things like her hair, the bags under her eyes, or even her choice of clothes all changed. My wife has always been someone who enjoyed dressing up. Pastel colors are her favorite. Weird earrings she finds from God knows where, shoes, makeup, sweets. Little things that made her suddenly stopped appearing. Again, I tried to argue that because she works in a hospital, her style of choice was most likely limited, but even when she was home, it was different. Guilt was eating me alive. My hands would tingle in pain just thinking about the burden she must be carrying all on her own. I decided to stop acting oblivious. Even if I had to do something I deemed as awkward or unnatural, I was going to push through because she deserves better. I began to initiate simple intimacy. If it meant simple hand-holding or working in the same room as her, I did it. I no longer asked if she was okay, but instead let her know that I would always be there for her whenever she needed me. She's my priority. Although it took some time, I was able to coax her into confiding in me again. We did revisit the housewife thing after a few months. She admitted that this feeling came from a deep sense of loneliness, stress, feeling burnt out, and the witness of a child's death. It was her first time witnessing a gradual, inevitable death and had grown quite attached to both the child and the mother who happened to be our age. This made the entire tragedy even more painful. However, my wife is still a doctor and things move quickly. She tried forgetting about it and moving on, but the realization of the weight she carries as a health professional kind of became burdening. She began questioning her years of study, her skill, her abilities. Things that she took great pride in turned into insecurities. Eventually, she came across some aesthetically pleasing life as a housewife content on YouTube. The idea of never having to go through such stress and heartbreak seemed so freeing to her. No longer having to see children in poor conditions, focusing on herself, her home, her own personal life, and our relationship. To be completely honest, I didn't know how to comfort her. For one, I'm not a health professional. Whenever I curiously looked at her notes, my head would start spinning seeing words that seemed so foreign. Our careers differ so much from one another that I didn't know what would be appropriate to say. What can you possibly say to someone going through this type of heartbreak? With my limited knowledge, I told her that she shouldn't carry that burden and blame herself. People are quick to run to doctors whenever they get the slightest symptoms because they know that a doctor knows best. You naturally bring comfort, a sense of relief and safety. To me, she is no different than a superhero. The joy she brought to that child stuck with her right until her final moments, and that's something she should be proud of. The child was able to live a little longer and experienced so much more joy because of her kindness and expertise. We revisited this conversation a lot, and every time I listened, eventually, she gained a lot more confidence. She relied on her supervisor, as well, who's been in the field way before either of us were even born. Seeing her get better day by day made me so incredibly happy. We're at such a great place in our relationship right now. I love hearing her voice, seeing her, being near her, and being there for her. I missed her so much. I don't know how we went so long without speaking properly. She's my best friend, my family. I want to say that I wish I had known what to do sooner, but this entire incident was necessary. I believe it is. It brought us so much closer. We're family, and speaking about heavy subjects shouldn't be odd between us. I learned a lot about my wife, myself, and our relationship. I'm very happy with how things are going. Although we're still busy, we always find some time for ourselves. We also recently adopted 2 cats. I know a lot of people suggested that perhaps my wife was getting baby fever, but I assure you, our kittens definitely taught us that kids probably aren't meant for us. Not anytime soon anyway. Thank you again for being so kind and honest with me. I'm excited to learn more and deepen our emotional connection, and I can only see a brighter future ahead. Relevant comments. Commenter. Honestly, this is very refreshing. I agree with the other posters that your wife does need to set up someone/something to be her support system, like a counselor. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that her work offers these things. It's maintenance like trimming grass or toenails, and should not be viewed as something shameful at all. Opie, thank you. I absolutely agree. My wife grew up in an environment where mental health is viewed as something that eventually passes like a common cold. So seeking mental health support has never been a thought. However, it is something that we most definitely want to look into now that we've distanced ourselves from said environment. Update 2. Hey everyone, first off, I just want to say thanks to everyone who reached out with their thoughts, advice, and even just kind words. I had no idea this would get so much attention, and I'm truly grateful for all the support. Here's another update for those who've been following our story. So, life has been a roller coaster these past few months. After our last heart-to-heart, my wife and I decided it was time to take some serious steps to address her mental health. She found a fantastic therapist who specializes in trauma and stress management, especially for medical professionals. They hit it off right away, and I could see a noticeable change in her demeanor after just a few sessions. She's been more open, more relaxed, and much more like her old self. One thing that's been particularly transformative is her therapist encouraging her to explore hobbies outside of work. My wife has always been incredibly dedicated to her job, but she needed something that was just for her, something that brought her joy without any pressure. So, she picked up painting. I never knew she had such a talent for it. Our apartment is slowly becoming a mini gallery of her work, and it's amazing to see her creativity flow onto the canvas. She says it's therapeutic, and I can see how it's helping her process her emotions. On the professional side, she's become more confident and self-assured. Her mentor at the hospital has been a great support, providing guidance and reassurance as she navigates the challenges of her residency. It's clear she's found a renewed sense of purpose and passion for her work. She's still deeply affected by the patients she loses, but she's learning to cope and find balance. We've also made a conscious effort to maintain our own connection. We've set aside Friday nights as our special time together, no matter what. It's non-negotiable. We've done everything from cooking dinner together, binge-watching cheesy movies, to taking spontaneous road trips. It's been incredible for both of us. We're rediscovering why we fell in love in the first place, and it feels like we're dating all over again. Of course, not everything has been smooth sailing. There was a particularly rough patch a couple of months ago. My work was getting insanely busy, and despite my best efforts, I found myself slipping back into old habits of prioritizing work over our time together. It was like a wake-up call when I noticed the distance growing again. My wife, thankfully, didn't hold back this time. She sat me down and let me know how much it hurt her, how she felt like we were slipping back into our old ways. I'm so glad she did because it made me realize just how easy it is to take someone for granted, even when you love them deeply. We made some changes after that. I started working from home more often, and we made sure to have lunch together almost every day. It's such a simple thing, but those little moments really matter. We talk about everything now, even the mundane stuff, and it feels good to be so in tune with each other's lives. And then there's the cats. Oh boy, the cats. We named them Muffin and Biscuit. They've brought so much chaos and joy into our lives. I never considered myself a cat person, but these little fur balls have completely won me over. They're such a handful, always getting into trouble, but they're also incredibly affectionate. They've been a great distraction and a source of endless entertainment. Recently, we had a big family gathering. My wife's parents are, let's just say, traditional. They've always had high expectations for her, and while they were supportive of her career, they also didn't hide their excitement at the idea of her being a stay-at-home wife. This created a bit of tension because they didn't fully understand why she was having second thoughts about her career. During the gathering, there was a moment when her mother made a comment about how much better she looked since she was taking it easy. My wife, to my surprise, calmly explained that she was actually still working hard as a doctor, but that she was finding balance and happiness in her life. It was a tense moment, but I was so proud of her. She stood her ground and articulated her feelings without getting defensive. Her parents were taken aback, but I could see a flicker of understanding in their eyes. They didn't completely get it, but they respected her honesty. It was a huge step for her, asserting herself like that. One thing that's become clear through all this is that our journey is far from over. We're still learning and growing, both individually and as a couple. We're stronger for it, though. Every challenge we've faced has brought us closer and taught us more about each other. I also want to address something that came up a lot in the comments. Many of you pointed out how important it is for both partners to have their own identities and interests outside of the relationship. That hit home for me. I've started picking up some hobbies myself, like woodworking and cooking. It's been great to have something that's just mine, and it's given us even more to share with each other. Plus, it's fun to surprise her with a new dish I've learned to cook or a little piece of furniture I've made. In terms of future plans, we're taking things one step at a time. We've talked about the possibility of kids someday, but right now, we're content with our little feline family. We're focusing on our careers, our passions, and most importantly, each other. The idea of having children is something we're open to, but we want to make sure we're in the right place emotionally and mentally before taking that step. Update 3. Hey everyone, it's been a while since my last update, and a lot has happened. I'm here with another round of news, developments, and some wild stories that I think you'll find as entertaining and dramatic as our life has become lately. First off, remember how I mentioned my wife and I were thinking about getting a dog? Well, we did it. Meet Max, a rambunctious golden retriever puppy who has brought even more chaos and joy into our lives. Muffin and Biscuit were not thrilled at first, but they've slowly started to tolerate the little furball. Max, on the other hand, seems to think he's a cat and tries to curl up in their bed. It's hilarious and heartwarming to watch them interact. Life at home has become a whirlwind of activity with the three of them. If you ever want to test your patience and multitasking skills, try managing 2 cats and a puppy in a small apartment. There have been days when I come home to find the place looking like a tornado swept through. But every chaotic moment is worth it when I see my wife laughing and playing with them. It's like having a tiny zoo, and it's brought us even closer as we navigate the challenges together. Professionally, my wife has made some significant strides. She's been promoted to a senior resident, which means more responsibilities, but also more recognition for her hard work. Her confidence has soared, and she's been taking on leadership roles, mentoring younger residents, and even speaking at medical conferences. It's amazing to see her passion and dedication paying off. But with the highs come the lows. One of her patients, a little boy she'd grown quite attached to, took a turn for the worse. It hit her hard, and there were nights she'd come home and just collapse into my arms, crying. It's moments like these that remind me how tough her job is and how important it is for me to be her rock. We've had some deep, late-night conversations about life, death, and everything in between. It's been tough, but it's also brought us closer. I've learned to listen better, to just be there without trying to fix everything. Sometimes, all she needs is to know she's not alone in her grief. On the legal front, things have been pretty intense for me as well. I recently took on a high-profile case that's been consuming most of my time. It's challenging but also incredibly rewarding. My wife has been my biggest cheerleader, and I can't express how much her support means to me. We've had to be extra mindful about balancing our time together, making sure we don't fall back into old habits of neglecting our relationship. Now, onto the more dramatic and outrageous part of the update. A few weeks ago, we had a bit of a scare. My wife's car was stolen from the hospital parking lot. It was a nightmare. She called me in a panic, and I rushed to her side. We filed a police report, but honestly, we didn't have much hope of getting it back. It felt like a violation of our safety and privacy, and it shook us both. Miraculously, about a week later, the police found her car abandoned a few towns over. It was a mess inside, but nothing of real value was taken. We were relieved but also paranoid. We decided to upgrade our home security and even took a self-defense class together. It's been empowering, and it's given us a new sense of control over our safety. And then, there's the saga of our families. My in-laws have been a mixed bag of support and stress. My wife's mother, who previously didn't fully understand her career struggles, has started to come around. She visited us recently, and we had a heartfelt conversation about everything. She even met Muffin, Biscuit, and Max, and surprisingly, she fell in love with them. It was a breakthrough moment for my wife, seeing her mother finally start to understand and support her choices. On the other hand, my own parents have been stirring up some drama. They've always been supportive, but lately, they've been dropping hints about grandchildren. It's been a bit overwhelming, especially since we're not ready for that step yet. We had to have a tough conversation with them, setting boundaries and making it clear that we're focusing on our careers and each other for now. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. We also had a big family reunion on my side, which turned into quite the event. Imagine 100 people, most of whom you barely know, crammed into one space. There were awkward conversations, lots of catching up, and of course, the inevitable family drama. My cousin, who's always been the black sheep, decided to announce her surprise engagement to a guy she'd been dating for a month. The whole family was in an uproar. It was like something out of a soap opera, with tears, shouting, and even a dramatic storming out. My wife and I just sat back, watching the chaos unfold, thankful for the relatively peaceful life we've built together. Through all this, our bond has only strengthened. We've learned to lean on each other more, to communicate openly and honestly, and to appreciate the small moments of joy amidst the chaos. One of my favorite new traditions is our Sunday morning breakfasts. No matter how busy our week has been, we always make time to sit down together, cook a big breakfast, and just talk. It's become a sacred time for us, a way to reconnect and recharge for the week ahead. Looking back, I realize how far we've come since that first post.